Okay, we'll wait about another minute or so, see if anybody else rolls in. I'm kind of expecting not a lot of folks tonight since it's Halloween. I have a treat for you and a trick for you. The treat for you, and this is a treat for some of you and others, it's not gonna matter too much because you've already done it. I have reopened every quiz, including the midterm, until Sunday at midnight. That is your treat. So if you are behind on quizzes or you didn't get to finish something because of bad Wi-Fi, this is your treat. You get an opportunity to get those things done. Get them done. The trick is we're gonna do 2 chapters tonight, and then you have to do a chapter on your own. That's the trick. So those quizzes will be open after class tonight until Sunday at midnight. So be sure that you get those done, because I'm not gonna reopen things 1,000 more times. So please take advantage of it. If that's gonna be helpful to you, be sure and get it done, because this is a limited time offer. And if you're watching, if you're not normally watch the Zoom recording, remember I give a code word somewhere in the lecture, and you need to send that to me by Monday so that I can go back and give you attendance credit for this class. So it's good to put the date of class in the subject line. That way it doesn't get lost in the shuffle of emails, and I'll be sure and see it immediately. Today's date is the 10/31. So I would put that or Halloween class or something in the subject line so that I notice it and be sure and give you credit. Okay, let's get rolling. Let me share my screen. And let me make Zoom bigger so I can actually see people. If someone pops in late, I can be sure and jot that down. All right. Thank you. Okay. And here we go. Okay, why is this silent? Why is it too small? What is going on? Hang on. Something is not right.
Lesson: hard rock groups of the late 1960s and 1970s, such as Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Iron Butterfly, incorporated heavy bass and drum parts with riff-based structures into their music. These characteristics are also present in heavy metal. Unlike hard rock, though, the lyrics of heavy metal tend to focus on dark, sinister topics such as the occult, death, and witchcraft. During this lesson, we will focus on the early heavy metal groups that were popular in both Europe and the United States.
Heavy metal grew out of the hard rock movement. And as a result, there's a significant amount of overlap in the influences and styles of both types of rock. We tend to use those terms interchangeably, heavy metal and hard rock. There are technical differences, but we often call them the same thing, and the groups tend to cross over in our minds. In general, both are based on riffs and focus on high volume and heavy distortion. But heavy metal's message and subject matter is different than hard rock. It's usually darker and more, the word they use is sinister. I'm not sure that that's the word I use. It tends to trend more toward the occult and other kinds of less savory influences. During this lesson, we're going to focus on the early heavy metal groups that were popular in Europe and the United States. Heavy metal is riff-based like hard rock. Heavy metal also focuses on high volume and heavy distortion. Most heavy metal music has a thick bass line and strong bass drum accompaniment, both of which lend the music a bottom-heavy sound. Further, heavy metal often makes use of the power chord, which is heard when the guitarist plays open, fifths, or octaves. We encountered the power chord in the music of the Kinks and the Who. Both heavy metal and hard rock are built on riffs that repeat throughout a song, but the riffs in heavy metal tend to sound far darker and heavier compared to their hard rock counterparts. Led Zeppelin is often considered the progenitor of the genre of heavy metal, although the group did not regard themselves as a heavy metal band. Their use of distortion, riffs, and powerful beats are all characteristics that are present in heavy metal music, but by doubling the bass line on the organ, John Paul Jones created a solid, bottom-heavy sound for Led Zeppelin. This type of sound also permeates heavy metal. Like Led Zeppelin and other hard rock groups, most heavy metal bands had experience playing the blues. This influence of the blues is evident in a number of heavy metal songs that feature virtuosic guitar solos and lengthy repeated riffs. Many critics consider the American band Blue Cheer's 1968 cover of Summertime Blues to be the first heavy metal recording ever made. Summertime Blues was written and recorded first by American rockabilly artist Eddie Cochran in 1958. The recording features heavy amounts of distortion in the guitars and a weighty bass line. At times, the guitar and bass play the same rhythm as the drums, which adds to the song's heaviness. So let's take a moment and hear this cover of Summertime Blues.
Sometimes I wonder what I'm gonna do. Lord, there ain't no cure for the summertime blues. Oh, well, my mama, papa told my son, you got to make some money. Well, if you wanna use a car, go right next Sunday. Oh, Lord, I didn't go to work. I told the boss I was sick. Sometimes I wonder what I'm gonna do. Lord, there ain't no cure for the summertime blues. I'm about to take 3 weeks. I got to have a vacation. I got to take my mother to the United Nations. I come to my congressman and he said, whoa, niggas, boy. Sometimes I wonder what I'm gonna do. Lord, there ain't no cure for the summertime blues. I've got to take 3 weeks. I got to have a vacation. I've got to take my mother to the United Nations. I come to my congressman and he said, whoa, niggas, boy. Sometimes I wonder what I'm gonna do. Lord, there ain't no cure for the summertime blues. Wow, ain't no cure.
That sounds a lot different than when Eddie Cochran first wrote it. Oops. This computer is crazy. Wow, okay. Another early example of heavy metal was recorded in 1969 by the American band The Stooges. I Wanna Be Your Dog is heavily distorted. The riff includes only 3 notes and it permeates the entire song. I Wanna Be Your Dog also includes a piano riff that consists of a single note, which is repeated through the whole track. In a sense, the piano part is more of a rhythmic gesture than a melodic riff. Well, that would make sense since it's only 1 note. But regardless, it's an integral part of the rhythmic drive of I Wanna Be Your Dog. Let's hear I Wanna Be Your Dog by the Stooges.
Now we're gonna be face to face, and I'll lay it right down with my favorite place. Now I wanna be your dog. Now I wanna be your dog. Now I wanna be your dog. Now I'm ready to close my eyes. Now I'm ready to close my mind. But now I'm ready to feel your hand. To lose my heart on the floor of the sand. Now I wanna be your dog. Now I wanna be your dog. Now I wanna be your dog.
Although Blue Cheer and the Stooges recorded single tracks that are representative of the emerging genre of heavy metal, They are not considered heavy metal artists of the period. The first heavy metal album was released in 1970 by the British group Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath was one of the first major British heavy metal bands to emerge in the late 1960s. Here they are. A lot of hair in that picture. This group's membership included Ozzy Osbourne, guitarist Tommy Iommi, bassist Geezer Butler, and drummer Bill Ward. During the late 1960s, the group was a British blues revival band called Earth. As the group became increasingly fascinated with heavy sounds and dark topics, they changed their name to Black Sabbath, which was the title of a horror film directed by Boris Karloff. Their early albums focused on dark power, witchcraft, and demonic influences. Boy, did we pick the right night for this subject or what? Black Sabbath's music from the early 1970s is riff-based, and very often the voice, guitar, and bass all perform variants of the riff during the song. These layers and repetition add to the heaviness of the sound. The group's first album, Black Sabbath, was released on Friday, February 13th, 1970. Critics typically agree that this was the first heavy metal album ever released. The album opens with a track called Black Sabbath, and the song contains many references to witchcraft, the occult, and the devil. In one passage of the lyrics, Osbourne sings, "Big black shape with eyes of fire, telling people their desire. Satan's sitting there, he's smiling. Watch as those flames get higher and higher. Oh no, please, God help me." So let's take a moment and hear a bit of Black Sabbath. Hear that minor chord, that minor drop. You can already tell that something's very different about what you're about to hear. And I think we'll stop right there. I think you get the idea. The lyrics are not the only references to the devil in this song. The riff on which Black Sabbath is based is constructed around an interval called a tritone. A tritone is an augmented fourth or a diminished or flatted fifth. That is the distance between a C and an F sharp. In church music of the medieval and Renaissance period, the tritone was forbidden in all music because it was thought to be the devil's interval. And it's really hard to sing correctly, too. Although the tritone has become more accepted in music, it is still typically used to evoke the sinister. Throughout Black Sabbath, the full riff and tritone interval on which it's based can be heard in the guitar, bass, and in Osborne's vocal lyrics. In addition to the tritone-based riff, church bells ring during the song and provide a funereal atmosphere. Despite the album's darkness and heaviness, Black Sabbath does let its blues influence shine through from time to time. Most of the songs are based on blues riffs, and the form of the songs are standard rock forms. The song The Wizard includes a harmonica solo performed by Osborne, a clear musical link to the group's blues background and experience. I will let you listen to The Wizard on your own. The group's second album, Paranoid, which came out in 1970, was a critique of the Vietnam War. The group had originally planned to call it War Pigs, which was both a derogatory term for those involved in the Vietnam War, as well as a play on war piggers, a corruption of Walpurgis, a traditional European spring festival associated with witchcraft. After the group recorded Paranoid, however, that became the album's new title, as well as the lead single released from it. Paranoid contains a motoric riff. That's a word I've never heard before. I think it's supposed to be like a motor-like riff that keeps it going. That the bass and guitar repeat throughout the song. And although the song is about paranoia, the word paranoid is never actually used. Another significant single from Paranoid was Iron Man, which contains iterations of the song's riff in the bass, guitar, and vocal line. The heavy accents on beats 1 and 3 and Osborne's distorted articulation of I am Iron Man also lend a heavy, sinister overtone to the song. The distortion was not the result of advanced studio techniques. Osborne delivered the line while standing behind a fan. Have you ever done that? Speaker singing to a fan, listen to what it does to your voice. So let's hear Iron Man. This is something you have probably heard before. Because it did get some radio play. There's that riff. Okay, we'll stop right there. I think you get the idea. Again, if you want to hear the rest of it, it is available to you through your online access. In the early 1970s, Black Sabbath was accused of inciting a young woman to commit suicide when the Paranoid album was found on her turntable after her death. The group was not found responsible for her death, but they continued to fight against accusations that their music caused depression and suicide. According to Osbourne, I never sat down to write lyrics with the intent that anyone should kill themselves. I feel very sorry for those kids, but why can't you sing about suicide? It's a thing that really happens. Black Sabbath again found themselves accused of negatively influencing their listeners when David Berkowitz, who was known as the Son of Sam, claimed that he had listened to Black Sabbath's music extensively. This claim that heavy metal music caused violence or death is a theme that critics would frequently return to during the 1980s and 1990s, as we'll see in future lessons. Whether they were responding to accusations about their music or whether they simply decided it was time for a change, Black Sabbath began to record lighter, less macabre music beginning in 1972. For example, Laguna Sunrise frequently features acoustic guitars. The ballad Changes from 1972's Volume 4 is a waltz, and it includes a piano and a mellotron instead of electric guitar, bass, and drums. The group declined in popularity during the 70s, and in 1979, Osbourne was fired from Black Sabbath for his unreliability and substance abuse. After Osbourne's departure, Ronnie James Dio became Black Sabbath's lead singer, and then he departed to form his own band, Dio. Ian Gillan then became the lead singer, and he also left to start his own group, the Ian Gillan Band. Both Butler and Ward frequently quit and then rejoined the band during the 1980s. Iommi was the only original member who never left. So let's hear Changes.
I feel unhappy. I feel so sad. I've lost the best friend that I ever had. She was my woman. I loved her so. But it's too late now. I've let her go.
You can really hear some blues influence behind this one. So that string sound is not actual strings, it's mellotron. We're going reverse.
We shared it up together. We found a way. It's in the world that is you. My heart was blinded. Love went to spread.
Okay, so we'll stop right there. Again, if you would like to hear the rest, it is available to you. Another important British heavy metal group was the Welsh band Budgie. Budgie's members included bassist and vocalist Burke Shelley, guitarist and vocalist Tony Borg, and drummer Ray Phillips. The band's name was a play on Budgie Toys, an English company that manufactured die-cast cars and trucks. Die-cast is metal. According to Shelley, we love the idea of playing noisy, heavy rock, but calling ourselves something diametrically opposed to that. Budgie's self-titled first album was released in 1971, and it was produced by Roger Bain, who had also produced Black Sabbath's music. The group's music was steeped in the blues and hard rock, but it was far heavier in sound than most hard rock at the time. Budgie's music also included guitar solos performed at breakneck speeds by Borg, many of which would become the models for later metal bands such as Metallica and Megadeth. Examples of Borg's guitar playing can be heard in singles such as Bread Fan and Crash Course in Brain Surgery. That sounds cheerful. Let's hear a little bit of Crash Course in Brain Surgery. Okay, this says this is Metallica. I want to hear Budgie. So let's back up. We're both. Huh? Okay, whatever. Okay. There is no Budgie to hear, so we'll hear Metallica. Okay, that's a good spot to stop right there. Alice Cooper is one of the key figures in the development of American heavy metal. Born Vincent Furnier, Alice Cooper chose his stage name with the help of a Ouija board, the novelty game that became a symbol of the occult. Both the lead singer in the band were named Alice Cooper, and the band's members include Cooper on vocals and harmonica, Lynn Buxton on lead guitar, Michael Bruce on rhythm guitar, Dennis Dunaway on bass guitar, and Neil Smith on drums. Here is Alice Cooper. Here in the center is the man himself. And here is also Alice Cooper. The band's live shows were built around outrageous props, shocking antics, and gender-bending costumes. Cooper himself usually wore leather, heavy makeup, sequin costumes, runny black eyeliner, and studded jackets or gloves. Their shows often ended with the execution of Cooper by the electric chair, guillotine, or noose. Their props included a live boa constrictor, and Cooper would often dismember dolls on stage with an axe. His most notorious moment came at a live 1969 show when a chicken somehow found its way on stage. Cooper, not realizing the chickens could not fly, tossed the chicken into the audience. Instead of flying away, the chicken plummeted to the ground and was torn apart by the audience members. Yeah. Rumors abounded that Cooper had bitten the head off of a chicken and consumed its blood on stage, which became one of the most, bless you, persistent legends about Alice Cooper and his stage antics. R.I.P. Chicken, sorry for you. The group's most successful singles during this period were I'm 18 and School's Out for Summer. Their music was dark, heavy, riff-based, and often had gothic or gruesome messages. Unlike British heavy metal, however, Alice Cooper's music was far more melodic, and the lyrics were easier to understand. In addition, riffs were important in the introduction and interludes of the music, but they did not necessarily recur throughout the entire song as they did in British heavy metal. I'm At 18 is clearly rooted in the blues with its harmonica solo and electric guitar solo. School's Out for Summer also has a bluesy electric guitars riff, but Cooper's vocal delivery is far more aggressive in this song compared to I'm 18. Further, School's Out for Summer suggests not a period of respite in the form of summer vacation, but rather the utter destruction of the institution. School's been blown to pieces. As dark as these songs were, they were not odes to the occult or tales of satanic rituals. Instead, they were dark versions of issues that faced many teenage listeners. For example, I'm 18 concerns the doubt and insecurity that plagues a person when they're on the cusp of manhood. So let's take a moment. I think we've all heard School's Out for Summer. So let's hear I'm 18. That will be something that perhaps we have not heard.
I'm in the middle without any plan. I'm a boy and I'm a man. I'm 18 and I don't know what I want. 18, I just don't know what I want. 18, I gotta get away. I gotta get out of this place. I'm running out of space. I gotta let this rain and the whole man's heart. So 18 years to get this far. Don't always know what I'm talking about. It's like I'm living in the middle of town. 'Cause I'm 18, I get confused and wretched. 18, I just don't know what to say. 18, I gotta get away.
In 1975, Cooper began a solo career. His first release as a solo album was Welcome to My Nightmare, a concept album depicting a journey through a child's nightmares. The album's first song, which is also called Welcome to My Nightmare, mixes elements of blues, rock, funk, and jazz. Despite the fact that the lyrics describe screaming, sweating, and breakdowns, it sounds like an invitation to an adventure rather than a gruesome tale of horrors. Cooper continued to record albums and perform live shows well into the 2010s. Cooper's androgynous stage persona, dark stage shows, and dramatic but catchy music established the precedent for many other artists in the 1890s and 1980s and 1990s, such as Kiss and Marilyn Manson. Cooper also played the King Herod in the production of Jesus Christ Superstar, which aired on NBC with John Legend as Jesus about 5 years ago or so. Although we've largely focused on rock music's development in the United States and the United Kingdom, other countries also participated in the major movements that developed in rock music. The Scorpions, here they are, were a German group that modeled themselves on British heavy metal groups. Founded by guitarist brothers Rudolf and Michael Schenker in 1970. Okay, the group's first album, Lonesome Crow, in 1972, featured bassist, okay, here we go, Lothar Heimberg, drummer Wolfgang Dzoni, and vocalist Klaus Meine. The lineup of the band frequently changed during the 70s, and the only members who remained consistent during this time were Schenker and Meine. Despite the many changes in their personnel, the Scorpions began to achieve significant success during the mid-1970s. Their music combined the heavy riffs of British heavy metal with the more melodic vocal lines of American heavy metal, which can be heard in songs such as Robot Man. Let's hear a little bit of Robot Man. So I'm gonna repeat the Robot Man part again a couple of times, so I think we've got the general idea. Today, Mighty is the only member of the Scorpions who has appeared on every album the group has released. He was sidelined in the early 80s by nodules on his vocal cords, which required multiple surgeries and rehabilitation. He and the current lineup of the band continue to record new songs and tour. So in conclusion, heavy metal is an outgrowth of the hard rock genre. Artists such as Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple were prominent hard rock groups who are also regarded as major influences on the development of heavy metal. In the United Kingdom, Black Sabbath dominated the early heavy metal scene with its gothic themes, macabre riffs, and heavy sound. In the United States, Alice Cooper, both as a band and as soloist, was one of the first popular heavy metal acts, horrifying and fascinating audiences, with grotesque props, outrageous costumes, and violent theatrics. Other successful heavy metal groups, such as Scorpions, demonstrated that heavy metal and rock more generally knew no national boundaries. As we'll see, artists in this chapter laid the groundwork for many heavy metal groups that would emerge in the 70s and 80s, including Judas Priest, Metallica, and Van Halen. This quiz will be open at 8:30 tonight, and it'll be open until Sunday. Come on, online program, you can do it. Okay, moving on to glam rock.
Glam rock. In the 1970s, the genre of glam rock embraced showmanship.
That's all you have to say for yourself? Okay, glam is tonight's code word, by the way, for those of you who are watching the Zoom recording. Glam is your code word. Be sure and send it to me by Monday so that you can get credit for attending this class. Glam rock was largely a British phenomenon, and it was known for ambiguity and showmanship. The ambiguity of glam rock was one of genre, gender, sexuality, and even musical style. Glam rock could have a heavy metal edge, it could be piano-based pop ballads. Artists were openly gay or closeted. They were bisexual, heterosexual, or in the case of David Bowie, all and none of those labels at the same time. In this lesson, we will survey several artists who were part of the glam rock movement, who were associated with glam rock at one point in their careers. For the most part, glam rock is not definable by a certain sound or style of music. Instead, glam rock is all about the performer's embrace of the performance and theatricality. Here you see a picture of some early Bowie with the longer hair, eye patch. This is probably right around the Ziggy Stardust era. Glam rockers embraced themes of science fiction, space travel, and isolation. The rise of the American space program, which culminated with the 1969 moon landing, created heightened interest in themes such as outer space, alternate universes, and the loneliness of space travel. Glam rockers were also interested in themes borrowed from literature, mysticism, and mythology. One of the most important characteristics of glam rock was its emphasis on theater, performance, and theatricality. Whether the music sounded like heavy metal, the blues, or piano-based pop, the unifying feature of glam rock is the performer's commitment to the performance and to theater. As we'll see, glam rockers valued showmanship above all else. Glam rockers embraced androgyny and gender nonconformity, while outfitting themselves in costumes and engaging in behaviors that defied male-female gender binaries. Glam rock offered a place for performers to explore expressions of gender and sexual orientation. Many glam rock artists contradicted traditional gender roles in their music and their onstage persona. Alice Cooper, for example, was a heterosexual ex-football player from Michigan who would wear leather, women's clothing, and heavy makeup on stage while decapitating dolls and faking his own execution. His mixing of makeup and violence played with stereotypes of masculinity and femininity. David Bowie, as the character Ziggy Stardust, wore futuristic costumes that completely obscured his gender. Other singers embraced glitter in the most literal sense. Elton John's costumes frequently included sequins, feathers, and masks. Here's Elton John at the piano. The themes of loneliness and isolation that frequently occur in glam rock music may also address the feelings experienced by musicians who were gay or bisexual, but who could not come out. Homosexuality was decriminalized in the United Kingdom in 1967, which removed some of the stigma and permitted an increased, but limited acceptance for those who did not identify as heterosexual. The decriminalization of homosexuality did not translate into instant acceptance. For example, the cover of David Bowie's album, The Man Who Sold the World, was banned in the United States because Bowie wore a dress on the cover, which some critics claimed meant that Bowie was promoting homosexuality. Although not all glam rock musicians were gay or bisexual, the genre did open a space for some gay men to embrace spectacle in a way that was previously considered feminine. At the same time, straight men could be theatrical without necessarily being gay. Many glam rockers tried to separate gendered norms of masculinity and femininity from assumptions of gender and sexuality, both in their music and in their live performances. Led by British guitarist and songwriter Mark Bolan, Tyrannosaurus Rex was an acoustic duo that performed folk rock and occasional blues or rockabilly covers. In the early 1970s, Bolan began performing on electric instruments, and he shortened the band's name to T-Rex. He also added bassist Steve Curry and drummer Bill Legend to the band. During a 1971 appearance on the British television show Top of the Pops, Bolan had placed glitter under his eyes. The band's appearance and Bolan's glitter was the first major performance of the glam rock era. In the 1971 album Electric Warrior, featured songs with both innuendo and overtly sexual lyrics. The single Bang a Gong Get It On from this album was the group's only single to achieve commercial success on the American charts. Bolan appeared in concert wearing glitter, sequins, and sky-high platform boots, all of which became essential components of the glam rocker wardrobe in the 70s. Let's hear a little bit of Bang a Gong. This was covered again in the 80s, but I'm having a hard time remembering by who. Now I'm going to stop right there. The remake was the Power Station. I wouldn't have remembered that if I hadn't looked it up. Paul Francis Gadd recorded a few singles in the early 1960s under the stage name Paul Raven. But when the glam movement took off in the 1970s, he took on a new stage name, Gary Glitter. Backed by a band that was alternately called the Glittermen and the Glitter Band, he recorded hits such as Rock and Roll Part 2, Doing All Right with the Boys, and Rock in 1975. Rock and Roll Part 2, commonly known as Hey, had some crossover success in the United States, and today it's used as a sports anthem during which fans can shout, hey, during the chorus. You've probably done that at some point. Gary Glitter embraced the opulence of glam rock. He owned dozens of glitter suits and pairs of silver platform boots. In the United Kingdom, the term glitter rock was often applied to over-the-top glam artists thanks to glitter and the sparkly costumes that he donned during his performances. I'm willing to bet that you have heard the Hey song before if you've watched any sports or attended any sports. Here it is. Hey! 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 This thing will not pause. Okay, so now you know where that comes from. As a teenager, David Robert Jones played saxophone with a jazz band called George and the Dragons. Jones became increasingly interested in the British blues revival movement, and in 1963, he began singing with a blues band called the Hooker Brothers. During the 1960s, Jones also participated in London's mod scene, singing with bands such as the Manish Boys and the Lower Third. As part of the mod movement, Jones began wearing androgynous clothes during his performance. In 1966, Jones had to change his name because the Monkees and Davy Jones were becoming increasingly popular. He chose Bowie after the knife because he wanted his music to cut like a knife through lives. When David Robert Jones became David Bowie, one of the most important figures of the glam rock movement was born. Bowie had no interest in simply singing on stage in front of a band. Instead, he wanted to create characters and turn his live performances into theater. One of his earliest characters was an astronaut named Major Tom, whom Bowie created for the 1969 single Space Oddity. Inspired by both the 1968 Stanley Kubrick film 2001, A Space Odyssey, the name of the song is a play on the film's title, and the 1969 American moon landing, Bowie created a character who preferred to live in space, alienated from humanity, rather than returning to Earth to live among people. The song juxtaposes folk-like strummed acoustic guitars and electric instrumental effects. Space Oddity was Bowie's first major hit on the British popular music charts. Let's hear Space Oddity. Ground control to Major Tom.
Control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on.
You have a countdown. It's getting ready to blast off.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You really made the grade. Have the papers want to know whose shirt you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm slipping through the door, and I'm floating in the most peculiar way. And the stars look very different today. I'm floating on a tin can, far above the world. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do. I passed 100,000 miles, feeling very still. And I think my spaceship knows which way to go. Tell my wife I love her very much, she knows. Ground control to Major Tom, your circuit check. There's something wrong. Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me? I'm sitting in the tin can, far above the moon. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do.
David Bowie was one of those artists who would reinvent himself every once in a while and kind of change his entire look and his entire style. In the early 1970s, Bowie formed a band called the Spiders from Mars. The band's personnel frequently shifted. The guitarist Mick Ronson was one of the few consistent members of the group. One of Bowie's most memorable and enduring characters was Ziggy Stardust, whom he introduced to audiences in The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, released in 1972. According to Bowie, Ziggy Stardust was a totally credible plastic rock star. Ziggy Stardust was an alien who had come to the planet Earth, became a star, and then buckled under the weight of his own celebrity. Bowie played the role of Ziggy Stardust wearing futuristic, androgynous clothing and heavy makeup. The live performances of the album required spectacular lighting effects, elaborate props, and extravagant costumes. The final track on The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars is Rock and Roll Suicide. The song describes the final demise of the rock star Ziggy Stardust, and it features a compound meter, which is not the norm in rock and roll. The song begins with Bowie accompanied only by a guitar, and the song builds in intensity and instrumentation until it reaches the climax, and therefore the fall of Ziggy Stardust. Bowie continued to play with gender ambiguity, identity issues, and themes of isolation during the 70s. On the cover of his Aladdin Sane in 1973, Bowie was pictured from the collarbone up with orange dyed hair and a brightly colored lightning bolt painted on his face. That's a very common image. If you look up David Bowie, if you go to a Google image, you will probably get a picture of that album cover. During the live shows for the album, Bowie would wear a variety of costumes, including a loincloth, and engage in provocative acts such as simulating sex on stage. In the album Station to Station in 1976, Bowie introduced a new character, the Thin White Duke. The Duke was an unambiguously masculine character wearing a crisp shirt and pants with a waistcoat, always with a pack of French cigarettes prominently displayed. To Bowie, though, the Duke was a nasty character indeed, an amoral, soulless figure. The tour for Station to Station became known as the White Light Tour because the stage and Bowie were frequently bathed in white light. Bowie not only embraced androgyny, but he also did not shy away from manipulating perceptions of male and female genders. For example, on the cover of his 1971 album, The Man Who Sold the World, Bowie wore a dress and a wig and reclined on a daybed, holding the Queen of Hearts card in his hand. During a promotional tour in the United States, he wore the same dress during the interviews with the press that he wore on the album's cover. The cover was banned in the United States because it was considered too suggestive, and some critics thought Bowie was promoting homosexuality by wearing women's clothing. Bowie's exploits in his music and his characters frequently led to questions about his own sexual orientation. Bowie is on the record in several different publications stating that he is gay, bisexual, and heterosexual. Clearly, he embraces sexual ambiguity in his personal life as well. He was married to the model Iman in 1992, however. Bowie played with sexual and gender norms throughout his career. He challenged assumptions about gender and sexuality by moving seamlessly between male, female, and androgynous onstage persona, none of which were necessarily connected to his personal life. This is a 1980s version of Bowie, when he was in his serious Moonlight phase. During the 1970s, Bowie had recorded music in dozens of styles and genres, including funk, which is Fame, electric, Sound of Vision, and pop, China Girl. But by the early 1980s, he had largely abandoned the glam look and aesthetic. So let's hear Fame. This is one of his most famous and well-known songs. This one gets a lot of airplay. Yeah, but we'll play. Oh, there's that album cover right there in his picture.
Take things over. That's hard to swallow. There were things
You can hear that riff kind of floats into the surface of most of the song. Then it takes a sharp left turn right here. It comes right back where it started. Okay, I think we'll stop right there. Kinda hate to, cause I dig that tune. It really stopped, okay. Never know with Spotify. Hey, China Girl is also there, if you'd like to hear that. You may have heard that if you listen to much eighties music, that was a pretty popular song in the mid-eighties. Elton John, British singer-songwriter Elton John, who was born Reginald Dwight, also participated in the glam rock aesthetic. Pianist John wrote most of his songs in collaboration with lyricist Bernie Taupin, and together they created dozens of hits for John in the 1970s. His first hit single in the United States was Your Song, which appeared on the album Elton John. Elton John followed this album with 6 more that went to #1 on both the British and American pop charts, including Honky Chateau and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. That's one of my particular favorites. John's early songs were solo ventures, but he began employing a backup band during the 1970s. John and his piano were always at the center of his sound. Following in the wake of nostalgic songs such as Don McLean's American Pie, John's Crocodile Rock is a nostalgic song about the early days of rock and roll. In the song, John describes the days when rock was young and describes a fictional rock and roll dance craze called the Crocodile. Rocket Man, I think it's going to be a long, long time, addressed in 1972, addresses feelings of loneliness and isolation experienced by an astronaut, which was a common theme in the music of glam rockers, because we just heard David Bowie and his Major Tom character, and Rocket Man is right along those same lines. So let's hear Rocket Man. Hopefully you've heard this before. This is also something that gets a lot of airplay on classic rock stations.
Gonna be high as a kite by then. I miss the earth so much. I miss my wife. It's lonely out and straight on such a time. That's white. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. Touchdown brings me round and get to mine. I'm not the man that think I am at home. No, no, no. I'm a rocket man. Rocket man.
That's one of the most misheard, misunderstood lyrics in all of rock and roll. Burning out his fuse up here alone. Nobody knows what he says there, but that's what he says. Okay, we'll stop right there. I bet you've heard that before. If you're a fan of the Big Bang Theory, you've heard that. John and Taupin have collaborated on over 30 albums during their career. It's impossible to pin Elton John's music into a single stylistic category. His music and live performances during the 70s were very much influenced by the glam aesthetic. For example, he would often sport sequin-encrusted glasses, enormous feathered costumes, and shiny, brightly colored suits. He has performed in cat costumes, Minnie Mouse costumes, and during a performance at Dodger Stadium, a Los Angeles Dodgers uniform made entirely of sequins. John's spectacular performances and costumes from this era are unsurpassed in their visual impact. John's sexual orientation was the subject of much speculation during the 70s and 80s, particularly since his performances were so flamboyant and his costumes so lavish. Although he claimed to be straight and married a woman in the 1980s, by 1988 he had come out as gay. He has a partner, he's been with his partner David Furnish since 1993. If you have not seen Rocket Man, the Elton John bio movie, you should really see it. It's excellent. Personally, I think that Taron Egerton, who plays Elton John in that movie, was robbed in the Oscar category that year. Oh gosh, what's his name? Rami Malek won the Oscar that year for playing the lead singer of Queen, Freddie Mercury, but he didn't even do his own singing. And Taron Egerton did all of his own singing in the movie, and it's really quite good. So if you haven't seen it and you're interested in Elton John's life at all, it's pretty much no holds barred. Speaking of Queen, during the 1970s, the British band Queen combined the drama and intellectualism of progressive rock with the theatrical components of glam rock. Led by singer and songwriter Freddie Mercury, Queen also included guitarist Brian May, bassist John Deacon, and drummer Roger Meadows Taylor. The group's music contained studio techniques such as overdubbed guitar parts, and the recordings often featured 4-part vocal harmony. Mercury was a flamboyant stage performer, often wearing extravagant costumes on stage or performing without a shirt. He used a bottomless microphone, that is, a microphone that's not attached to the stand and must be carried by the singer during the performances. By using a bottomless microphone, Mercury was free to travel the full length of the stage. Mercury was able to encourage crowd participation on a grand scale. During a 1985 performance at Live Aid, Mercury engaged over 70,000 people into clapping and singing with him. Queen's most ambitious project was the 1975 album A Night at the Opera. At the time of its release, it was the most expensive album that had ever been produced by any group. The album includes songs that are written by all 4 members of the band, including Taylor's I'm in Love with My Car and Deacon's You're My Best Friend, and May's 39. According to May, 39 was a song in the style of sci-fi skiffle, and it addressed themes of loneliness and isolation experienced by astronauts who have been away on a voyage. Again, there's that same theme. The songs on A Night at the Opera were very diverse in style, tone, and subject. The most famous single from A Night at the Opera was Bohemian Rhapsody, which is a self-contained story. In classical music, a rhapsody is a piece with irregular form, but all of the individual sections of the form are related to each other. Sergei Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini and George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue are 2 famous examples of musical rhapsodies. The song unfolds in a series of sections that tell the tale of a murderer. The role of the murderer in the song is played by Mercury. The elaborate vocals in the song were created by overdubbing the voices of Mercury, Taylor, and May. The group also created a video to promote the song, which is relatively uncommon in the 1970s. It was not until the advent of music television, or MTV, in 1981 that musicians began creating music videos on a regular basis for the singles they released. So they were kind of a forerunner of the MTV generation. During the early 1980s, Queen lessened the drama of their recorded music. They shifted toward an increasingly blues-oriented style in Crazy Little Thing Called Love and the funk-inflected sound in Another One Bites the Dust. Queen did not abandon its glam roots, however. The band joined David Bowie in 1981 to record the hit single Under Pressure. Mercury continued to perform with the same enthusiasm and showmanship, even as the group's style changed. Like Elton John, Freddie Mercury was a gay and closeted man until the 1980s. Although critics and reporters frequently speculated about Mercury's sexual orientation, particularly in light of his onstage showmanship and his affinity for opera, Mercury remained mum on the subject. Mercury died of AIDS in 1991, only a day after announcing that he had the disease. At the time of his death, he was living with his male partner for several years. After Mercury's death, the remaining members of the band staged a memorial concert for him. This concert, a release of greatest hits, and the appearance of Bohemian Rhapsody in the 1992 film Wayne's World all contributed to a resurgence in popularity for the group in the early 1990s. I'm willing to bet you've heard every single one of those songs from Night at the Opera, those post Night at the Opera. Crazy Little Thing Called Love was redone by, I believe, Dwight Yoakam as a country tune. Another One Bites the Dust. I heard it in the grocery store the other day. And Under Pressure gives us the hook for Ice Ice Baby, later on in the late 90s, early 2000s. I can't remember exactly when Ice Ice Baby came out. So I'm willing to bet you've heard every single one of those. The members of the American band Kiss were able to combine the hard edge of heavy metal and the theatricality of glam rock. Although rumors abounded that the group's name was an acronym for various occult-related statements, such as Knights in Satan's Service, the members of the group maintained that their name is simply Kiss, with no other meaning implied. Guitarist Paul Stanley, guitarist Ace Frehley, bassist Gene Simmons, and drummer Peter Criss all wore elaborate costumes and heavy makeup during their stage performances. By wearing makeup, leather pants, platform-heeled boots, and sequin codpieces, the members of Kiss flaunted the lines between masculinity and femininity in their costumes. The band members never appeared in public without makeup until 1993, which increased the sense of theatricality and mystery surrounding their onstage persona. Each member of the band had his own makeup and persona to accompany the makeup. For example, Ace Frehley was the spaceman and Gene Simmons was the demon. Kiss live shows were spectacles, complete with levitating drums, fire-breathing, and pyrotechnics. Their music is largely blues-based in style, and all four members of the band sing. Kiss's songs typically include catchy choruses that practically beg audiences to sing along, such as Detroit Rock City and Hotter Than Hell. Kiss's early albums were not particularly commercially successful. With the release of their live album, Rock and Roll All Night in 1975, though, both the single and the album on which it appeared, Alive, became huge hits. Alive was a live album that contained songs from the group's earlier albums, and the popularity of the live album led to a spike in sales of Kiss's earlier albums, on which many of these songs had originally appeared. Kiss was one of the most aggressive bands of the 1970s in terms of marketing and commercialism. They were featured in a pair of Marvel comic books. Fans could buy Kiss dolls, pinball machines, board games, trading cards, and Kiss Your Face makeup kits. In the mold of the Beatles and the Monkees, the members of Kiss starred in a full-length film called Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, which debuted on NBC in 1978. It is a truly horrible film. Critics trashed the film, but it was one of the most viewed television programs of the year. The members of Kiss were able to parlay their sense of showmanship beyond their live concerts and into their ability to sell their image to their fans. Let's hear rock and roll, a bit of Rock and Roll All Night. Again, I bet you heard this, so I don't know that we really need to hear the whole thing. Come on, play. Every day. I bet you heard that before. All glam rock acts are united by a sense of theatricality and showmanship. The musical styles of glam rock groups are diverse. Kiss was a hard rock band, Queen was a highly produced and stylistic eclectic, and David Bowie recorded in dozens of different styles over his career. In the glam rock aesthetic, the performance is more important than any specific style or sound. Glam rockers also embraced gender ambiguity and fluidity, often wearing androgynous costumes, women's clothing, heavy makeup, or extravagant costumes. Although many listeners and concert goers embraced the fantasy and bombast of glam rocks, others derided it. As we'll see in the next lessons, punk rock was the one musical reaction to what was perceived as the over-the-top nature of glam rock and prog rock. So this quiz will be open in about 35 minutes until Sunday. So you are responsible for doing the Roots of Punk chapter 28 on your own and doing that quiz. So that quiz is open until Sunday. And then we'll pick it up with chapter 29. Now, next week, I am having my knee replaced next Wednesday. So I'm not exactly sure what's gonna happen on Tuesday night. We may be zooming from a hotel room in St. Louis because I have to be there at like the crack of dawn. Or we may go ahead and do class and just do a couple chapters and have you do one on your own like we did tonight. So I can get out a little early and get up there and try to get a little sleep. So I will try to let you know, especially you, Curtis, so you'll know what to do. About what we're gonna do next week. We will have class regardless of where it is. It's just a question of will I be here in Fredericktown or will I be in a hotel room in St. Louis? So if you have any questions, as always, please let me know. Remember that your Halloween treat is that all quizzes, including the midterm, are currently open until Sunday. If you need to catch up now, get it done. Okay, if you have any questions, please let me know, and if not, we will call that good for this evening.